Good evening and welcome to the April 2nd meeting of the Transportation Subcommittee. Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilor Dakota.
Here.
Councilor Janess.
Here.
Councilor Noon.
Yeah.
3 present.
I was going to ask if anybody from the public would like to speak, but I see there's one person at the lectern, and that's Ms. Altman. Ms. Altman, the floor is yours.
Okay. If we could show the presentation, please. Good evening. Thank you for your time this evening to talk about vulnerable road users, which is a mouthful, so I typically just say VRU. So if I slip and say VRU, it's vulnerable road users, because that's a really hard word. A vulnerable road user, essentially anyone not in a vehicle. Pedestrian, bicyclist, scooter, someone in a mobility device. What I'd like to do tonight is just go through our existing conditions in the city and kind of tell you a little bit about how we are starting to address the areas of concern. So when MassDOT and NEMCOG close a year of crash reports, that means everyone has been double checked. They analyze the data and determine high crash locations for all road users, including areas where pedestrians and bicycle crashes have occurred. The last year of data that has been closed is 2020, so they're a little backed up. What you see here are the high crash locations in the city of Lowell. The green areas are bicycle clusters, and the blue areas are pedestrian clusters. The red intersections are in the top 200 crash clusters in the region. I don't think any of these areas are particularly a surprise. The next slide shows the pedestrian and bicycle crashes from 2018 to 2023 that have been uploaded to MassDOT's impact portal. On the left is the serious injury crashes, which are any injuries that are basically life-changing. That's what they are classified as. And then on the right are the fatalities. You can see the areas that are consistently of concern. We've got Westford Street, downtown, we've got near UMass Lowell. I don't think, again, any of those are particularly a surprise. What we want to study also and take into consideration is our vulnerable populations, where people are trying to go on foot or by bicycle because they don't have a vehicle, and where they are the most unsafe. You can see that almost all of the VRU crashes in Lowell are in the environmental justice populations of the city. So MassDOT has evaluated crashes throughout the state in a data-driven assessment in accordance with the National Roadway Safety Strategy committed to by the US DOT. There's a link in the prior motion response for the whole report. What this assessment does is help the state and the city proactively address VRU safety in all appropriate projects to respond to the current increase in traffic fatalities. They do a deep dive into where and when the VRU crashes occurred. They're things like proximity to schools, transit stops, MBTA stops, occurrences of drug and alcohol use, time of day, age of the person, all that. Very detailed. And they did it throughout the state, and this is their results in Lowell. So, what are we doing? Through the Lowell Forward process, city staff spoke to many different users on our roadways. Several mobility goals were created based on that feedback, the primary one being the goal you see here for a safe, equitable, and connected mobility network that accommodates all users. This has been and will continue to be our priority within our infrastructure projects. The desire for a safe, connected bicycle and sidewalk network was a need heard consistently at the Lowell Forward listening sessions. People want to bike and walk to their destinations, but won't if they don't feel safe. Currently, NEMCOG is putting together a Vision Zero action plan for the region, also using data-driven metrics. Vision Zero is a nationwide movement and commitment to eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes on our road network. You'll be hearing from me in the next year about supplemental studies being performed through a Safe Streets for All or SS4A, you might have heard of, grant to work toward a vision of 0 deaths or serious injury crashes on City of Lowell streets, and to implement a Vision 0 policy, potentially. So what I hear time and time again in the literature, data, and research being done toward a nationwide Vision 0 is that vehicle speeds must be reduced on local streets where all types of road users mix. When vehicles go faster, the chance of a fatal or serious injury occurring in a crash goes up exponentially. This was a driving factor for the citywide 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. People, drivers, and others make mistakes, but those mistakes have less serious repercussions when the vehicles are traveling at a reduced rate of speed. A more visible effort is beginning to trial more physical traffic calming elements. These temporary speed humps were obtained too late last year to be able to be implemented safely and effectively. We now have all the departments on board to install the 6 speed humps we have in 2 neighborhoods to determine their effectiveness and collect feedback from neighbors. So the following 2 slides are all the projects happening in the city currently or after 2020, when the high crash locations were identified, both by MassDOT and the city. Also in your packets is a list of the high crash location and the progress being made on each of them. Small things like signal timing changes, sidewalks, or adding ADA ramps can have a big impact on safety for vulnerable road users. Larger projects take time and investment, but being targeted by city staff through a variety of grants, capital funds, and state opportunities. So this map is without the high crash map, and this one is. So you can see that we are specifically targeting some of the high crash locations as well as other locations. So we are on the road to 0, as long as everybody gets on board, I guess. So we need the help and we need the attention of all the roadway users to get to 0. So that's the end of my presentation, and I would love any questions.
Great. Mr. Clerk, let the record show that Councilor Mercia, Getchia, and Yum are also in attendance as well. And I will open up the floor to my 2 colleagues to ask Ms. Altsman any questions. Councilor Janess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, thank you, Ms. Altman, for your presentation here. There's a lot of good information and a lot of good steps that we as a city can take. I'm excited to see Vision 0 being put on the roadmap. I think that's an important step for us to take locally and ties in with what's going on regionally and state and nationwide as well. And there's a big potential for a lot of wins here. The one question I have about Vision 0 is how it ties in with our existing complete streets policy. Just can you speak a little bit about how it would interact with that existing policy we have?
The existing policy basically wants to protect vulnerable roadway users at its core. But before that term was coined, it was complete streets, right? We want to have facilities for all road users on our streets. So that's kind of the original term was complete streets. Now it's more proactive. How do we target intersections and roadway segments that are a problem and get the infrastructure in place to remove the potential for serious injury and fatal crashes. So they're very complementary, in my opinion, and that's the way the messaging has been from the state and USDOT.
Great. That's great to hear. Thank you. And then I had another question around our existing signaling in terms of crosswalks, particularly in the higher pedestrian traffic areas. So around our schools, the downtown, the Acre, other places where we have a lot of walkers already. And kind of what can we do with our existing infrastructure in terms of timing lights or, leading pedestrian intervals, exclusive walk phases, things like that. Is that something we're looking at, and can we do that with our existing equipment?
We can do exclusive pedestrian phases or leading pedestrian intervals in probably 90% of our signals. Some of them, the very older ones, might not have that capability, but I know DPW and the electricians have been pretty good about, you know, when they can, buying new controllers to upgrade our signals, even if they can't upgrade the whole signal. So, yes, the exclusive pedestrian phase is kind of a Massachusetts thing, but there are reasons to use it, and that is something that we will be looking at. There's a little bit of a balance. You'd want to also make sure that your cycle lengths aren't too long. Like, I don't think we could put exclusive pedestrian phases on the Thorndike Street at the big intersection because it's just too long and we'd negatively impact the vehicles, which, okay, I don't mind negatively impacting vehicles a little bit, but is a pedestrian going to sit there for 2 minutes and wait for the entire cycle length to go? So it's just something to consider when we look at all of our signals.
Sure. Obviously, it needs to be a balance, and it needs to make sense for all the roadway users. And you want to build a system that people are actually going to use. Putting rules in place doesn't do you any good if people just break them and cross the street, run red lights, things like that. So I can understand that. The last question I had was simply around the citywide speed initiative. I think implementing the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit was a good step, and I'm glad that the last council was able to pass that and move forward. But as is, you know, widely accepted, speed limits don't necessarily control the speed of the vehicles on the street, which is why I'm also happy to see us doing things like the speed humps, because roadway design is really going to have the biggest influence on the speed of the traffic. So I look forward to seeing how we can keep putting that Safe Streets for All money to work, to develop these things and address the known problem spots that are identified by this report. So I think there's a lot of good potential here, and I really want to see what we need to do in order to begin adoption of that, of a Vision Zero policy for the city.
I definitely agree with you that if a road is designed for a high rate of speed, it's going to be almost impossible to get somebody to drive 25 miles an hour on Andover Street or Father Morissette. They're designed for 40 miles an hour. So until we address the actual infrastructure, correct, it's not just putting up a sign and say, please drive 25. So.
Well, thank you very much. I'm out of questions at this point. Thank you.
Councilor Noon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Liz, for the short but very meaningful presentation. So where are we at with regard to encouraging walkabilities and biking? Can you speak to that?
Sure. So we have a lot of planning documents, right? So we have the Go Lowell plan, which outlines a bicycle network in the city. We have our Complete Streets prioritization plan. We have a Complete Streets policy. So what we need to do now is implement it. So I know as streets get resurfaced, we're looking at whether they are, if we have the ability to widen sidewalks, if we have the ability to add bicycle lanes. A lot of our larger roads that people want that are connector roads to get into and out of the city, such as Chelmsford or Westford or Merrimack, we really need to separate the bicyclists from the cars in more than just a painted line on the street. So that's infrastructure, right? That's a little bit more involved. So it's baby steps, right? It's process. So when Acre Crossing, we have money from the state to put a separated bike lane on that block of Merrimack Street. The engineering department is looking to resurface and reconfigure Merrimack Drive, Father Morissette and French Street in the next couple of years with the opening of the high school. So we are looking at where we can put bike and pedestrian infrastructure there to make people safer. Again, with that complete streets and the Vision Zero mindset. So
How hopeful are you in making this, biking and walkability happening? Because we haven't seen it really, very few. I mean, Councilor Mercier will take note on that because Father Morissette, we did the bike lane and all that, and I hardly see anybody biking.
right, because the bike lanes, as buffered as they are right now, they don't lead anywhere, right? And people don't feel safe. If I had an 8-year-old, would I take my 8-year-old on Father Morris? I wouldn't take my 18-year-old on Father Morissette on a bike, right? The people are going too fast. It's not separated enough. So that's all things that we have to consider. And that, so things like when we reassess Father Morissette, do we make it narrower and put bike lanes up on the curb so they are physically separated from the vehicles? So, but on a local street, they should be shared, right? Bicycles and vehicles should be able to share our local streets, our neighborhood streets. And it's just a matter of people understanding that the streets have to be shared. And
I hope to see that full implementation of it someday soon. So back to the hotspot area, the high crash area. I didn't see it on this list that Stephen and not Stephen, Westwood and Stedman, right? We've been talking about it for some time. I know Councillor Gutierrez, I talked even before that when Councillor Gutierrez came on, he filed a motion on that, and Councillor, then Mayor and Councillors, now Councillors, so can reach out. And now, as recent, Councillor John, the Chairman, John Dakota, is talking about this area and how asking for making some change so that, avoid a possible crash or serious one to happen. Where are we at on that?
Westford and Stedman is in the process right now of, with the law department to make sure we have all the temporary and permanent easements that we need. I have the design plans. I'm ready to go. I hope to be bidding that project out in the next couple months because we're just waiting for the easement process. Yeah. So the design is ready to go. If we can bid, we want to bid it out in the next couple months. Unfortunately, what I'm hearing is steel is like for the mast arms, it's like a 6 to 8 month ordering process. So what we'll see is we'll get somebody under contract. We might be able to do some things this winter. And then when the steel comes in, it's likely that you'll see a final installation of the signal next year.
Okay. There's so many other intersections that is, a high crash area. So the one other areas that I could, it's in the top of my head right now is that the Lincoln School and Chelmsford, that intersection. What is the plan for that? Any plan?
We had Chelmsford Street really needs to be looked at holistically. So I had put in for a grant to do that, and unfortunately we did not receive that. So we will have to do that analysis of Chelmsford Street in-house to try and figure out how we want to improve the safety along the entire corridor. There's a lot of people walking and trying to bike, and there's a lot of transit users on that road. So I don't have any firm plans yet. We're doing some minor signal upgrades at some of the signals, just as kind of a stopgap. And I know we had talked about Chelmsford at inland to and then up near the LRTA.
Yep.
So all those things have to be looked at one by one, and
Okay.
we have, more than 100 signals in the city, so I'm working on them as I can.
I totally agree with that. As only one of you, Liz. Thank you for all your work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Question I did have for you, and I think Councilor Noon touched upon it, was once the completion of the high school is done, we're also going to have pretty much the completion of the Link University of Lowell project. And how will that tie in, since it's part of the East Campus and part of that Father Morissette, and what is the long-term plan there?
The conversations that I've had with UMass Lowell is they're very much in favor of a separated bike facility to get their students and the residents of the Link to downtown, essentially, so they don't have to get in their vehicle, so they can take advantage of all the amenities that are downtown without having to cross dangerous intersections. So if we narrow up intersections, we put a buffered bike lane, we make it green, we make it a little more accessible, I think that'll be a really attractive amenity for getting the new residents and staff to take advantage of downtown. We also have to work with NPS, who are very much in favor of additional bike safety and pedestrian safety on, in front of Boarding House Park. So that's all included. Also, Bridge and French, we want to address that to get people to that
So
park.
this whole corridor is going to change dramatically, I would imagine.
Exactly. We have a lot more people coming in the next, their plan is 7 to 8 years or something like that. So we have put in for grants for that Suffolk Street Bridge because that needs to be upgraded to handle some more vehicular traffic. There's a couple of signals on Father Morissette that are old and don't have the right pedestrian infrastructure to get people across Father Morissette. So,
Like Councilor Noon says, that Father Morissette bike, that's just it's actually more dangerous than it is helpful for a bicyclist at this point.
Right.
Because you're trying to merge 2 lanes of traffic into one, and the bicyclist lane is right there, and it's confusing, to say the least. But I know that you're working on it, so I'm not going to hop on it at all, but I know change is coming. So I do appreciate your efforts.
At this point, I'm glad that the Father Morissette Boulevard stops where it does, because I found plans that they were
Right.
just going to blast through Back Central to connect Father Morissette around downtown to the Lowell connector. I'm like, oh boy, am I glad those residents stood up for that, right? So it's just interesting the way engineering kind of changes
I thank you for your work. Councilor Mercier?
Yes, thank you, Madam Transportation Engineer. I don't really have any questions, but I just want to express some thoughts. And my first thought is, no matter who comes before us, there's always great concern, and sometimes we drill them to the point where they feel like, oh my God, do I really have to go there? But I just want to say that I want to thank you very much for this very detailed, well put together report filled with informative information, statistics, data, everything that you could think of. You outlined it very nice, and I just wanted to thank you for that. Also, I want to say that you did something this evening that is a pet peeve of mine. Not too many people know, but it's nice that you made a presentation and we get to see it, but you gave it to us as well. And I'm very grateful for that, because sometimes I miss things, and I always take whatever presentation, if we're lucky enough to get it in hand, I like to take it home and look over it again and see that I might have missed something. So thank you for being so thoughtful to give us this. And I just had to say that. And I find that I don't say too much, but I observe a lot. And I notice that when councilors have concerns about this section or this traffic situation or this issue or whatever, And I'm going to give you an example, and that is the lights at Gorham, and you know how you got that thing around it? And I do understand that. I asked that question, but I did know the answer because people were looking at the next light, going right through it, and it was a very dangerous situation that you did something about. And I noticed that whenever we have concerns, you're right on top of it. And you don't probably get praise enough, and I'm giving it to you right now. So thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Getchia.
Thank you, Chairman Dakota. Just a couple of things. When we talk about Father Morissette Boulevard and the high school project, hopefully we're talking over to UMass Lowell and trying to connect with the Link project, because as that rolls out, I know the high school was done earlier, so we might have to revamp our plans because of whatever they're doing. Just that conversation might be something we want to, or if you probably already
Yeah,
have
I'm already
established
having
that.
those conversations.
And I think they're important. When you look at your total crash data and you look at 2023 versus 2022, it went down 26%.
I will caution you that probably December is not in that 2023 number.
Okay.
Lowell police, sometimes they can be a little behind in uploading their crash reports, not to any fault of theirs, it's just happens.
It still really looks positive. If you even divide the other ones by 11, you're still down like 15%.
I think we are down a little bit. It's a slow process, but hopefully, we'll be able to see more and more as as we go along and get contracts in and designs in, and then actual construction. You should see more and more construction from me in the next year or so.
One thing that I just wish we had more timely data on is the top 200 crashes, because it says 2018 to 2020. It's a 4-year-old study, so it doesn't really bring into a lot of the other areas from 20 to the 24 area. So, I mean, this is old data, and I don't know how relevant it is today, so that's just because of some of the changes that have been made to these areas, as you've outlined, between 2020 and 2024. So some of the data is going to be a challenge to look at right now because of just some of the things that you've done since you've been here to change these things. So like Councilor Mercia outlined over on Gorham Street. So, when you look at that could skew this now to a different type of avenue. So.
Exactly, but MassDOT has their process. They go through every crash in the entire state, and then double check location and everything. So they have interns usually it jumps up after the summer when they have a bunch of interns at MassDOT that can go through all the data, and then so we'll see 2019 to 2021. It's a 2-year cycle, so they are a little behind, but that's the best data that I am given from the state.
The state's 4 years behind.
Eric's, that's
I
not
guess,
bad. Eric's, that's not bad, you know that.
No, it's not bad. That's what I was getting at. And then the other 3 streets that we talk about when we put in the speed humps on Billing Street, Jean Ave, and Chrisman, when you start talking about all these streets, they're not on this list, and that's the challenge of balancing politics and function when you start looking at things. Because I know at one point Lincoln Parkway was another one that they were talking about putting the speed humps in, and we were looking at getting that done also, because they come around that corner. And I'm not challenging these 3, I'm just saying in addition to. And then when you look at like Chrisman Ave, you have 1 hump there and you got 3 on Billings, and Chrisman comes right into that highway, and then you can cut over to the back side to get to Boylston. So that's really a speedway all the way through, and Billings is so I'm not trying to compare one to the other, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at, I don't know how if this is, I know it's a
What was
trial.
the 3 humps on Billings? I know it goes up and down and up, but 3 seems excessive to me.
Well, the speed humps are not really a crash reduction measure, they're a speed reduction measure. So we had a lot, Billings, I'm not really sure why it's one way. So it's very wide, and we did speeds, we got a lot of complaints through our neighborhood traffic calming program. And we went out and took some data, and people were going very fast on that road.
Right.
So it's a good we have to balance too with the temporary speed humps, they have to be nailed into the road. So I can't put them in a brand-new road, or our city engineer would not be happy with me. So I have to look at for roads that have a large number of concerns on file from residents. I have a whole list, and so those three have a lower pavement ratings, so I can nail into them without without any trouble. And I hope that the implementation will show that they work, and then they can be installed in a permanent condition next, on other streets as repaving goes in, right? So this is a trial condition in relatively minor location, not minor, but relatively targeted locations that then we can get feedback, and then people can say, yes, I really like that there. So the one on Christman will be after the, on that one short
The ramp,
section.
yep.
What we're trying to do is slow or make Hollis Street not as attractive to people, which is the real problem. But that has a really good pavement condition, so I can't put anything there.
The reason why Billings was changed to one way because of the accidents of people pulling out of there onto Bridge Street.
Right, probably, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not changing it. I just, but they work best in series
Yep.
on a long straight
Makes
stretch like
sense.
that.
I get
so-
you, yeah. Counselor Yam.
I just had one more.
Oh, I apologize. Keith.
And then when we talk about the bicycles, I thought we were trying to connect to the trails in Chelmsford, and we were doing this whole bicycle network that we were coming through the city, and we were doing that. Have we changed that approach, and now we want to make streets and try to do, because it seems more logical in most of the towns, when you get out to the Lexingtons and out that way, they have a bike path where you're out of the way of traffic and you go and do your thing. And I just don't, and Father Morissette's a great piece. If you got onto the path out back, it would be much safer for bicyclists than it would be on that area. And I'm wondering if we got away from one and we're going to the other without an overlap there.
We're not going away from the trail system. Some of the other planners in DPD are working on the trail system, but we do need some road connections to get people to the trail system. We also need, the trail system can wind through town, right? But there's destinations are on our roads. So we do need to provide those connections to the destinations that people are looking for, like either their place of work or restaurants and, office and residential areas. So there's a balance, but yes, I do agree with you that we should not neglect our trail networks.
Because when you look over at Father Morissette, part of the trail system is just right behind the Songus, and then we
Right.
have out front. And what is the point? You know what I mean? You can just cut across and make a path that would have came back out afterwards, and you wouldn't have to be on Father Morissette. So that's my thought. When I looked at that in the beginning, I'm saying, do we not know what the left hand's doing, what the right hand's doing? I don't understand why you would have both unless we're trying to keep bikes off of the walking paths and saying, okay, now let's put them in the traffic. That's all. I think we just, and it was long before you, I think we have to do these studies and understand, okay, what is the pathway and how are we going to get to the businesses and how is it functionable? Because we're trying to serve two masters right now, and I don't see it ever connecting. We do a little here and a little there, but it doesn't make sense, and maybe
I
someone
think the
else has a comment.
communication between UMass Lowell and the city is going to be vital in achieving what you're looking for, Counselor.
Yeah, I think that's one area, and try to get down by,
you
where
gotta-
Jarvis just gave up that land, and we're trying to get over to that area from the downtown area along, you can get along the connector in that way and try to get it back down. I think that those are the challenges without getting into like Chelmsford Street. You're gonna have to come
Right.
now from, you just took Jarvis property and they donated back. Now, how do we get onto Chelmsford Street if we're gonna do Chelmsford Street? Was the plan to go back through the housing in that way like it was produced many years ago, or is it now changing to try to get Chelmsford Street involved? And I guess those are conversations that are too deep for right now, but it's just something to think when you start serving two masters and we can't really produce the outcome that we're all looking for.
I think the more infrastructure that we can provide for bikes, both on-street and on trails. I think it gives people options. For the person that's looking to have exercise and recreation on a trail is different maybe than a person that needs to go from the acre to downtown or the acre to Cross Point or something like that to get to. So there is a balance. I think we have to look at both.
You can certainly go through Mass Ave a lot quicker on the bike trail than you can down Mass Ave to get to those places. And they designed it so that you could actually dump out at any point back in. And I think that it's much safer off the roadways than on the roadways. And again, there's plowing issues when you start getting into the overviews. So I just would be cautious on a lot of this and try to see if you can dump back into the, because we don't have really that many areas that are filled with businesses. Like, is it one business we're going to Dunkin' Donuts, or are we going to the Cross Point Towers? There's two different philosophies here. If we're just dumping out for one person or saying go on the road for one person, I don't think it's logical to govern that way. That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Janess, then Councilor Yam.
Thank you, Chairman. To what Councilor Gitcher was speaking of, I think it illustrates the need for a network, right? We're not talking about point to point for that one person who's going to a job. We're talking about a network that people can use to get into the city, but also around the city. And I do think that this UMass Lowell Link project really speaks clearly and loudly to how it can be a nexus of a bike network. You're going to have fresh out of school graduates living in new residences. You're going to have jobs right there for those folks, and also internships for the existing students at the university, possibly high school kids being involved, possibly Middlesex kids being involved as well. And being able to have a bike network that connects all that as well as downtown allows people to get in and out of there without driving, without feeling like they're taking their life in their hands when they get on a bike, whether that's Father Morissette or a path or, a protected bikeway. It all plays into it, and it's all about building that network so that we can make those connections in and out of the city and to the areas where people want to go. And that's how you really develop the ability for a bike first, walk first community, versus everyone feeling like they need to get in a car because it's the only safe way to get where they're going. That's my opinion anyway.
I think there's an education piece too, that maybe people don't know where all the trails and networks are, and so that's built into any sort of network as we move forward. Is how do you get to these places? Is it better to use the trail system to get from A to B, and then once you get to B, where else can you go? So I think there's an education and a publication piece to this as well.
Councilor Yam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an issue that brought to my attention. I just want to bring to your attention that I will file a motion. The issue is that the parent who live on the west side of Fletcher Street, if you travel from Broadway, Fletcher Street northward, there will be North Common will be on my right, on your right, and then Merkland School. The parent who has children living on the west side of Fletcher Street, having their children cross that street over to Merkland School.
Okay.
In that section from Cross Street all the way to Varney Street, there are 4 crossings. It used to have a crossing guard who helped children crossing from the west side of Fletcher Street go to Merkland Street, but we do not have that, and the parents have to take the matter into their own hands to get their children from one side of Fletcher to Merkland School on the other side.
Okay.
There are 4 crosswalks, so I just want to bring to your attention, and numerous parents have reached out to me and then asked me to reach out to the city to do something to kind of reduce that potential fatal accident.
Okay.
Ms. Holtzman, I'll actually answer that for Councilor Yam. I'll take care of that tomorrow. I'll speak with the liaison at the police department. There is if a guard is not available that morning or afternoon, one of the police cruisers should be there to have the children crossed.
Right. There is police officer for the Stock Closer School.
No, but there
cruiser
should be
there.
one at Fletcher at Varney, I believe
Varney.
is where I put
There
it.
are 4 cross street.
Yep.
And then you have Willie Street when it meet with Fletcher, and then after that you have Butterfield cross street where Hole in the Wall restaurant is, and then after that you have Varney Street crossing, and then the next one is a 4-way stop at Bowers Street.
Right, so it's before that.
Yes.
So all those cross streets, there's one crosswalk
Right.
that has a
Yeah.
crossing guard. But like I said, if the crossing guard is not present,
Right.
a police officer should be
Right.
there
Yes.
for that 15, 20 minutes.
Right. I remember they used to have a crossing guard at Butterfield,
Yes.
right in front of the
was
hole in the wall. But recently, I think we do not have anyone at all.
Let me make a call in the morning for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Altman? Ms. Once again, thank you very much for your presentation. Very informative. I think there's a lot of discussion that's going to come further with the UMass Lowell High School, and just the visions of people like you that are going to make the streets better for pedestrians and bicyclists throughout the city. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm happy to come to a transportation subcommittee whenever you'd like.
All right.
So.
We have a motion
Great, thank you
adjourned
for your-
by Commissioner Jeunesse, seconded by Commissioner Noon. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.